This is basically Nick Clegg trying to save his leadership. I think that it will be difficult, given what we've said about the nature of the apology. Just one other thing, it's also going to be difficult because Vince Cable, when it's put to people in polls better than Nick Clegg, and that's becoming the concrete truth.
Very fortunate we have him here,
Indeed.
then, isn't it? So, Vince, why has it taken 2 years to get around to apologising for this?
Oh, Nick, we have apologised before, but I think, to be frank, people were so angry before people weren't listening. I think now they are listening. I think the other reason for the timing is Nick wants to make it absolutely clear there's a distinction between the pledge, which was wrong and which he and we have apologised for, and the policy which we're now operating, which we don't apologise for, and is actually in many ways an improvement and is now in operation.
And you also want to apologise, do you, for what you said and did before the election? When
Yes,
you were
we are collectively responsible. We all participated.
So it's not just Nick Clegg. It's the whole parliamentary party wants to apologise.
Yes, it is. He's said this as party leader, but I share the responsibility and I don't shirk from that.
See, the odd thing is that you were warned before the election that the policy was unaffordable by Danny Alexander, weren't you?
Indeed, and that's where the apology is justified.
And you chose to make a commitment in the manifesto that it was affordable.
Well, there's a distinction between the manifesto and the pledge, and the manifesto, 80% of which we carried into the coalition agreement, but we knew when we joined the coalition we'd have to compromise on that. The pledge was different, and that's what Nick Clegg is referring to.
But you had been told, you've just conceded, before the election that the pledge was unaffordable.
Well, if it had been affordable, other things would have had to go.
You were told by Danny Alexander on March the 16th in a confidential memo.
I spoke on economic affairs, and he was part of my team. We realised we were going to have to make cuts if we came into government. Yeah.
And yet you chose to say it was affordable. You chose to say it was all being costed out.
Well, that's where the apology is due, and rightly so.
Did you personally believe it was affordable?
Well, I was sceptical about the pledge, but we agreed collectively to do it, and I take my share of responsibility for that.
Did you personally believe it was affordable?
I personally was sceptical about the whole fees policy.
So you signed this pledge knowing it was possibly unaffordable?
Well, I signed the pledge on the basis that had we been in government on our own, which was the commitment, we would have put through that policy, and we would have done so. But the fact is,
Nick Clegg in that broadcast appeared to suggest that had you formed a government other than in coalition with Labour or Conservatives, you might have been able to implement it. Is that what you thought? Because if so, you're living in a fantasy world, aren't you?
Well, I wasn't living in a fantasy world, because for a year before the election, as you well remember, I think probably more than any of the other economic spokesmen, I was spelling out the need for economies and cuts.
You knew perfectly well it was unaffordable.
It was a policy commitment that would have cost money, and had we implemented it, other things would have had to go. Yeah.
So you knew it was unaffordable. Did you tell Nick Clegg it was unaffordable?
It was an unwise commitment to have made, and we regret that, and that was the basis of the apology.
Did you tell Nick Clegg it was probably unaffordable?
We discussed this between ourselves. As part of our leadership team, there was scepticism. As part of this whole fees debate, and that's been well advertised, but, you know, we agreed collectively to support it, and I take my share of responsibility for that.
And who in the leadership team agreed with you that it was possibly, probably unaffordable?
No, it's not a question of individuals. I mean, we debate these things.
It clearly is, isn't it?
No, I mean, look...
You had deep reservations. You were sceptical about it.
Well, I was sceptical about any significant financial commitment before the election for reasons we spelt out. But parties agree their policies. We agree them collectively. We take on board things we personally feel unhappy about. That's how decisions are made in parties and in government. It's called collective responsibility. I was part of that.
It was a stunt.
No, it was not a stunt. It was you know, a part of a genuinely felt wish to assist the student population. We weren't able to carry through with it, but it was certainly deeper than a stunt.
Well, what else would you call something that you were deeply sceptical about being able to afford, which you had been advised was unaffordable, and yet your leader chose to go through with nonetheless?
Well, I think one has to make a distinction here between the manifesto that we'd already agreed to, that was actually even more radical. It talked about phasing out fees, and the pledge which was about freezing them. Actually, the pledge didn't go as far as the manifesto that our party had decided it wanted to campaign on. Now, it's perfect, you know, with the luxury of hindsight, you know, people like me, you know, will say, you know, we were sceptical of the whole thing at the time, but that's not the point. The point was that whatever views we had at the time, we all collectively signed this pledge. It was wrong, and Nick has apologised, and we collectively apologise for it, and we now wish to have the debate about what is a sensible policy on universities. I think actually what we've done in office, something we're pleased of having done, we're careful to advocate.
Can you give us a guarantee now that everything, be it in this narrow distinction, either in the manifesto or in some election stunt, anything you promise will be stuck to at the next election?
Well, after our experience this time, I think you will find that we will not be going into the next election with a lot of expensive commitments. But, you know, we're being apologetic about this. I mean, all three parties, actually, in the past, have made pledges to students about either not increasing or not introducing fees. All three parties went back on those commitments in office. We've been badly punished for it. We've lost a lot of trust, but we're acknowledging it. But this is not unique to our party.
Do you recognise the damage you've done to trust in politics?
No, it has done damage, and that's why Nick is speaking in such heartfelt terms.
It's tragic in a way, isn't it? I mean, I knew young people who weren't going to vote, who saw your campaign and your pledge and went out, and I know people who actually went leafleting for you, and then they were betrayed.
Well, certainly they were very disillusioned, and we've had that anger. I've encountered it on a one-to-one basis with students I've met. I now go around university campuses, and there is a significant reappraisal, and people realise what we're actually doing, which is actually not introducing fees as people would understand it, paying cash, that what we've introduced in practice is a form of graduate tax people pay in relation to their income over their lifetime. It's a more progressive system, the one we inherited. Nobody pays upfront fees. I think when that is understood...
You didn't say that at the time,
No, we didn't say that at the time, but I think now that that is embedded, we've got a good policy for higher education. I'm very happy to go out and defend it, but we want to make a distinction in that, and having made a pledge which was wrong and we shouldn't have done.
Vince Cable, thank you.
Thank you.